My name is Eleni Maruli, and I'm a senior analyst in the advertising team at IHS. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the programmatic future of video advertising. So after kind of a few shaky years for the European ad markets, I think we can say that the European ad slump is finally over. In 2015, for the first time since 2010, all of the European Big Five are going to experience positive growth. Advertisers are much more confident with the improvements in the economy, and there's generally much more optimism about advertising driving their goals. However, there is a bit of a discrepancy between the Big Five and how they are recovering from the recession. So we have kind of the stronger performers, the UK and Germany, who have already come back to their pre-recession levels at 2007 ad market value levels. France, who is kind of reaching that level this year after a bit of a struggle in their TV advertising market, and through 2019 will reach a similar level to that of Germany. However, their southern European neighbors, despite growing for the first time in 2015 or in 2014 for Spain, will not actually go back to those pre-recession levels even through 2019. However, despite this European ad slump, although we're coming out of it, the one format that has kind of defied all of the drama has been online. So online has achieved a low single-digit, high double-digit growth throughout the last 4 years. And the reasons for this are kind of multifold. Firstly, the growth is coming from markets in the CEE region. These are markets that are growing from a low base. Broadband penetration is still quite low in general, and so as the online audience grows, ad budgets migrate, and we see strong double-digit online growth in those regions. But what's more interesting is that we're seeing growth in the mature online advertising markets as well. So these are online advertising markets that are spending €70 or more per capita on online advertising. So this is the UK, Scandinavian markets, the Netherlands. And the fact that those countries are achieving double-digit growth in online advertising shows that their innovation in online advertising is still generating revenue. One of the main drivers of this innovation is online video. In 2015, this year, online video will be 24% of all online advertising revenue. However, how does that compare to kind of more traditional advertising models? So this is kind of a drawing on from the slide that Ben presented. Online video seems to be growing in a more incremental, in a more complementary way to TV advertising in the European Big Five. You see here by 2019, it will be about 11% of the total TV video advertising revenue generation. However, there are markets where we are already starting to see some cannibalization. So markets like the US, like some of the Scandinavian markets, online video services like Netflix are actually denting some of the broadcaster audience share. And as that happens, we have to think about how we approach online video ad strategies. Who's actually gaining from this online video advertising growth? Obviously, it's growth across the board. We see broadcasters investing in it, growing with online video, legacy print publishers, online pure plays. But the two main beneficiaries, unsurprisingly, are YouTube and Facebook. YouTube celebrated its 10th birthday in April, so it has a lot of experience in video. It's been advertising on its video platform for a few years now. However, the interesting newcomer is Facebook. And actually what Facebook did in late 2014 is it surpassed YouTube and its online video impressions, due largely to the viral phenomenon of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. Now, this was not a one-off. And Facebook is investing heavily in its video strategy, as I'm sure Yoav will tell us a little bit more about later. And this is both on the content side, so it's speaking to content providers like National Geographic, the New York Times, and on the technology side as well to kind of create a more holistic cross-platform advertising offering. And so by 2018, we expect over 50% of video advertising revenue to be generated by these, YouTube, kind of the more incumbent online video platform, and Facebook. So how do we see this video advertising playing out? How is it going to look in practice? And IHS has identified 4 different formats that online video advertising will take. Firstly, the more kind of traditional, and the one you're probably most familiar with, is video advertising bought kind of over video content. So this is your pre-roll, your mid-roll, post-roll, anything that accompanies kind of a video content on those pages. The second one would be video as kind of a native in-content format. So it would be part of your content feed within, for example, a Facebook news feed, and it just appears as another post on your Facebook page. The third one on the bottom left would be video on already a brand page or a brand channel. So this is a consumer that's already engaged with an advertiser who is kind of trying to find out more and looking for video content on the brand on their proprietary page. And lastly, and probably most interestingly, as kind of online consumption is becoming more concentrated on a few platforms, we will see media owners and content creators hosting more of their content on these platforms. And that will require a combined video ad strategy, both from the hosts, so from the YouTubes and the Facebooks, and the video provider. So what becomes increasingly important when working with these technology companies, when working with Google, with Yahoo, with Facebook, with Amazon, is to be technologically enabled, to really understand what the technology that you are using is bringing. These guys are investing in the programmatic capabilities, they're investing in their data capabilities, in their measurement capabilities, and they're building these kind of, we call them tech stacks, or kind of a one-stop shop to serve the whole value chain from the demand side to the supply side. And in order to compete and cooperate with these guys, you have to partner or develop these capabilities to remain relevant. And this is becoming increasingly important because if we look at the key drivers of online advertising, although formats is, mobile, for example, are growing pretty strongly, what's driving this growth more so is actually the transactional models. So the programmatic mechanisms. We see video programmatic growing very strongly, display programmatic really driving growth for online advertising. Now let me take a step back just for a second for those who maybe aren't as familiar with the programmatic space, just to give you an idea of what it's based on. So programmatic is basically the automation of the ad process based on the premise of reducing wastage. So traditionally, you would have a website buy, so that would be a bulk buy of impressions based solely on the quality of the content of that website. So you would be paying one price for all those impressions, but only a few of them would really be relevant to the advertiser. As the online ad market matured a little bit, we moved to the kind of ad network buy, which was more of an aggregation of bundled interests. So you'd see the selling of something like a sports lover or a style interest person. Again, one price for that impression, and perhaps more targeted, but still some wastage there as well. The idea of audience buying is to moving to paying one unique price for that one impression that is most relevant to the advertiser, based on the data, whether it's demographic, which is what TV advertisers are most used to, or behavioral, first-party, third-party data, cookie data, and finding out that unique price for each impression that would be determined by what's available from the publisher and what's desired by the advertiser. So programmatic is hence driving online advertising because it's introducing efficiency into the ecosystem. However, the adoption of programmatic really varies by player. So although we talk about, programmatic is going to generate 36% of all video advertising revenue in 2018, and even more so on the display side, about 60%, the people who are actually or the companies that are actually benefiting from it, or the companies that are driving this, it's not equal across the board. We have broadcasters who are still quite shy when it comes to programmatic, and it's mostly YouTube and Facebook really that are investing and enabling those capabilities. So in summary, before we begin our panel, online continues to power European advertising markets as they kind of get out of their slump. Video is growing in a complementary rather than competitive way to TV, although we are seeing some cannibalization in some markets. And although adoption of programmatic varies across the board, it is one of the key drivers. And I hope to explore that a little bit more with our panel. So I would love to welcome everybody today.
Thanks, Eleni. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jack Kent from the mobile team at IHS Technology. And joining us on the panel to discuss the issues around programmatic advertising, the role of video, issues around data strategies for publishers, for programmatic and video platforms, the issues of multi-screen, partnerships between companies, and as we move from video to television in the programmatic landscape. We've got a broad range of views to represent here, starting with Yoav Arnstein from LiveRail, the video monetization platform recently acquired by Facebook. We have Fabrice Mollier from the leading French broadcaster TF1, Anne de Kerkhope from Videology, the online video advertising company, and Casper Schlieckum from Xaxis, the programmatic part of the WPP agency, and Eleni Marouli from the advertising team.
And Jack Kent from the mobile team. So I tried to outline a little bit, but just to kind of backtrack, video is really becoming kind of the new frontier of advertising. We're seeing investment in video from many companies. Brand dollars are moving towards video. So as we have this kind of two forces, we have the rise of video and the rise of programmatic. How has really programmatic changed with the rise of video? Please.
I'll start by, and I might disagree slightly with
Please.
some of your definitions. I mean, I find it really restrictive when we call programmatic a way of getting audience buys efficiently. That is a percentage of what we do, but it is not actually what programmatic is about. Programmatic is indeed about bringing smart decisioning, math efficiencies into the mix of how we buy. And potentially that was right about display a few years ago, that programmatic was about a huge amount of inventory and we were just trying to buy it as cheaply as possible, and it was all about that efficiency and reducing the cost as much as possible. That's not at all the case in video. When we're talking about video and programmatic video, you're talking about brand advertisers who are trying to extend the reach of their television and extend the reach of the quality premium environment in which they can operate in TV. And so their goals are not at all about reducing, another cent off the CPM. It's much more about saying, how can I find, yes, the audience, yes, the context together off TV, and do it in a safe, measurable, viewable way. And that's really programmatic. So programmatic isn't about real-time buying at the cheapest price. It is about giving the advertiser the same security, the same environment that it can get on TV in other platforms because the consumers moved there. And that's why we've seen people like TF1, broadcasters, embrace programmatic and video programmatic, because it is actually about extending what they do best.
Yeah, I think the display and video are very different. For me, the big news with programmatic for display was decoupling inventory from data. I think that the buyers mostly benefited from the fact that they can bring data to the table and cherry pick inventory. By that, basically, we elevated the value of some inventory that otherwise would have been probably undervalued. There was, and we know that in display, the supply is almost infinite. I think in video is different in terms of the supply is definitely more constrained, but the approach is pretty much similar. And I guess from a Kasparan perspective, assuming that you represent here the buy side, right? Is more. Also with video, is there inventory out there that we can elevate its value by bringing data or looking at audiences or just addressing specific KPIs we have with certain buys that will also elevate the value here and will actually, inventory that otherwise I wouldn't consider for video, or I would pay only a certain amount when I buy it directly, am I willing to pay a different price now because it drives objectives in a way I couldn't drive before. So the market forces are different because of supply and demand. I think some of the principles are the same.
So for broadcaster, can you hear me? Yeah. For broadcaster, and I agree with Anne, it took us a long time to go into programmatic because first of all, it changes the way we advertise our premium content as a broadcaster. So when programmatic started to move fast and mainly in the display business, we saw effectively prices go down. Everybody wanting to bid for the lower cost on the audiences and we look at that and we decided to move in and go into a test and learn attitude. So first we joined many sites and we built community named La Place Media, where we federate like 120 websites, mainly our premium press, print, radio, TV content, and we only sold display. And then we went into programmatic on that, but we were reluctant to go into the video content because we thought it was too premium. We wanted to test, and actually we were pretty full in selling it the classical way because there was a huge demand. The slide you showed before shows that there's a huge demand from advertisers to move into video advertising. So what we did is that we saw that like a kind of a big difference between classical advertising, which is content-driven, and programmatic is more viewer-driven. So it's not about selecting one show, it's about selecting a lady with a 6-year-old boy, or somebody with a garden. And it's, for a broadcaster point of view, it's very difficult to move from a world to another one. So we decided to create our own SSP. We named it One Exchange, and we started to do programmatic only on our own video content. The idea first is that we guarantee to our customers that it's secured for brand safety, because it's only TF1 content, so premium shows. It's 99% catch-up, actually. And then we started to learn a little bit, and we realized that, that's why I totally agree with Anne, that we were about to prove that we could raise the prices, which actually we've been doing for a year now. And actually, we also realized that it was very important for our customers to integrate some data, which on the classical way, it's more difficult for the agencies and the advertisers to plug the data activity into the trading, the classical trading. We recently made another move, which is very specific to France, is that in France, 45% approximately of homes are connected through a set-top box and have access to IPTV. So that's the first way to access TV in France now, IPTV. All the ISPs has developed their own environment, and we are working with them for now years, and putting at their disposal some catch-up programs. Actually, the normal programmatic world is not able now to trade IPTV, which is different links. And we just entered 3 weeks ago into a new IPTV dedicated SSP, which is One Exchange IPTV. We think it's a world premiere. I don't know any experience of that almost in Europe. And we just started 3 weeks ago with one customer. So it's weird programmatic, because when you do it with only one customer, each time he bids, he wins. And actually, that customer is Coca-Cola. And we just integrated 2 new customers this month, but we just wanted to check the connections and the leaks. And we're very proud to make that on programmatic into the IPTV world, which is crucial to us, because IPTV is half of our inventory. So it was very important also to compete with the non-TV video inventory you mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything on the inventory side's been said. I mean, I think the dynamics within the video space are very, very different to the display space, and I think have been well articulated. I mean, maybe I can just add a little bit to the actual data side of the whole thing, because I think part of what drove prices in display down so quickly in what I would call sort of programmatic 1.0 was that actually we talked a big game about data, and by we I mean the entire industry, not Xaxis. But actually, there was very little real data being applied. Actually, it was just a source of cheap inventory, often used for performance campaigns. A lot of publishers getting very, very frustrated, and actually, no one really had figured out at that point where to source data from, how to really make that, how to value that data, how to apply the data, and I think crucially as well, data doesn't exist in a vacuum. Data is way too often siloed, and actually, where data becomes valuable is when it gets connected with other data sources and extrapolated and sort of expanded out across into different use cases, and none of that was happening. It's starting to happen now more and more, and I think that's where you're starting to see what sort of I call programmatic 2.0, which is really it is all about data, and people have realized that really what sits at the heart of the entire programmatic strategy is some sort of a trigger around what it is that you're trying to do, and that might be audience data, it might be some other real-time data signal, like for example weather, which we do a lot of weather targeting, or sports scores, or my ad is on TV. I want to run a digital campaign only for the 2 minutes while my ad's on TV. I mean, there are lots of different real-time data signals and data triggers, and they are what make this space very, very interesting. Because to Yoav's point, if you're valuing the audience properly, then actually that's very encouraging for our entire industry. Because it means finally we're able to make some money again, you would hope, right? There is so much inventory, and I'd say even in video now, with more formats being created, like video in page and all these other things. I mean, the video space is somewhat constrained, but increasingly, isn't that constrained either. The same dynamics apply, and I think when people ask my boss Brian Lesser what he does for a living, he says he keeps the internet free, which I think is quite a good answer. And I think audiences and valuing audiences properly, are an opportunity for publishers to make money, and for for programmers and for the developers and everyone else to make money as well, and keep the internet free. So
you mentioned kind of plugging into different data sources.
Yeah.
So what kind of components should a publisher data strategy have?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest challenge on data, as I said, is it's still very siloed, right? And I think publishers specifically are used to selling inventory, and inventory can only ever be sold once. I mean, you can't serve 2 ads into the same ad slot, right? Impossible to do. Whereas inventory is whereas data is very, very different. It has a completely different business model, a very different sort of economic model attached to it, because you can sell data many, many times over to many, many different people, and with very different sort of pricing arrangements, whether it be all-you-can-eat data or CPM or mixed in with something else. I mean, there's so many different models you can apply, and I think publishers are still very scared about working with partners and using their data to work with partners. Clients have a different problem. Clients, are very, very siloed in a different kind of way, where they often have a lot of their really rich data within CRM platforms, and which are usually controlled by the CIO and the CTO. I saw a scary statement yesterday. I can't remember where I saw it, but it was a survey that someone had done. I think it might have been eConsultancy or someone like that. And they'd asked CEOs who they would go to first to try and solve the digital problems of their organization, and most had said the CIOs and the CTOs, which is kind of scary to me. Like digital advertising problems, not digital overall. Which is scary to me, because when the CMO goes to the CIO or CTO and says, "You've got all this great CRM data, how can we leverage that for our wonderful marketing campaigns? We have these great ideas." They say, "Not on my watch." It's like either they're worried about the regulatory environment or personally identifiable information or annoying customers, or whatever it might be. So again, data silos. And it's very hard to break those down. I mean, that's one of the reasons we've built Xaxis within an agency business, within Group M, is because we have access to the clients and access to the publishers, and we're trying to sort of break that down a little bit without being careless about it, because you have to be very careful.
I think it's also but that's where publishers might come under increased pressure again also when it comes to video, because a lot of it is a scale problem. And there's very few publishers that can provide scale with the data. Even if they were open with commingling their data with what the buyer is looking for, the scale they can provide is pretty limited. And I think this is why platforms like Google, Facebook tend to be dominant, is just because they can protect the data, but still bring a lot of scale to the table. I think that broadcasters, when it comes to video, of course, bring a unique user experience that will, I feel, for a long time still be appreciated by the buyer. But the question is, how can we long-term still enable publishers to increase the yield on their inventory, assuming that their own unique data will not be something that people necessarily will appreciate enough, and I think that's a big challenge for publishers.
But don't you think that's where the partnerships come in? Because I mean, again, it's each of those publishers, and I would say it's the same for clients, by the way. I mean, even a big client, even the largest clients have very deep data, but it's not necessarily that broad in terms of their data footprint. Don't you think there's an opportunity there?
Yeah, no, there's an opportunity, but the question is if I'm speaking too much on your behalf, you need to let me know. If a TFI says, okay, I'm very open, like what we did at Facebook with WPP now is basically saying, look, WPP, we're not going to let you take the data out, but why don't you bring your data into the Facebook platform and really create solutions or data segments that are more sophisticated. And there's nothing preventing TFA from doing that in the same way tomorrow. And I do believe that they can still protect their assets, and many other publishers. The question is, at what point do you start as a buyer saying, or as a marketer saying, well, actually the data here is mostly value that I brought to the table, and I feel that the value you should get for the experience you created, and so and so. So at what point do you start pressuring TFA and say, look, the value of this whole thing is, I don't know, 50 euros CPM, but you're actually only adding in the 10 euros out of that. 40 euros of value is generated by the data I ingested into your platform. That's where I think we will start seeing maybe people feeling less comfortable.
If I can use Coca-Cola as an example, because we've done 500 campaigns for Coca-Cola around the world, they are like a fabulous client. So their briefs just to give you an idea of a normal Coca-Cola brief, and it'll show you the value of those partnerships, right? They will say, okay, I've got 12 simultaneous campaigns I want to do. They're based on some upfront TV campaigns I've bought from TF1. I'm going to want to have parallel online campaigns every time my TF1 ad is played. That's called TV Sync. I will want a different ad to be played when Pepsi-Cola is advertising on other channels than TF1. Plus, weather matters to me. We drink more Coca-Cola when it's hot. So you are going to add a layer of weather syncing. And here are the 12 audiences I'd want. And by the way, I'd really, really like premium content. And I'd like it on the following kind of viewability metrics. And I'd like it to be measured by OCR, which is a validation measure of our audience, right? No single publisher can do that on their own. Xaxis can't do it on their own. We can't do it on our own. And then Coca-Cola says, and please enrich my DMP, which is run by Adobe. And by the way, it doesn't have much data yet because precisely I'm stuck with a conversation with my CIO that hasn't gone anywhere in the last 12 months, and therefore I have no access to the CRM data. I got some segments I know I'd like to enrich.
Could you just say what a DMP is in case somebody in the audience
Data
might-
management platform, right?
Yeah.
The brains that manage the data. So that's the typical Coca-Cola brief that we will get every single day at our office. If you're a publisher, that can scare the shit out of you. Or you can say, that's great. Here are the pieces of the puzzle I bring. Let me partner with the following integrations, with the following agencies to enrich the picture. And that is exactly what's happening in the data world. It's a beautiful time to be in this industry because you're doing such complex things every single day. This is not the one campaign to win an award. This is the daily requirements we face. And for publishers, I think a few years ago that could have felt very scary. Now they're saying, that's great. What role am I going to play in what that brief just described? Excellent. And IPTV is a perfect example, right? That is my strength. I'm a broadcaster. So naturally, I'm supposed to own the IPTV space. It would be silly to let someone else run the IPTV space. So let me own that, run that, open my data applications to others without giving away my data, but let me open it to enrich the rest of the portfolio.
So Fabrice, it sounds wonderful.
Well,
What's
I'm very happy
scary
to see
about it?
everybody wanting to do campaigns on my inventory, so thank you, everybody on the table. It took us a while to define our data strategy. First, because everybody's right. We primarily think as a publisher that we are the only processor of data and everybody should use it. And we're partly wrong. Because it is true that we need to be in an open world. Actually, we're not the only ones. When you do campaigns on TF1, you do also campaigns on other media. So what your clients need is to have access to their data or to third-party data, is not only my data. So what we decided is to launch a very wide research platform about data, not only on digital, but also on TV. So we released it a couple of months ago. And the reasons was that first, it's been 30 years that we drive our business through TV ratings, which are excellent. We think that the data, which is, it's a big opportunity for us to enrich the ratings we have and then take the better decisions and improve our editorial proposal, whether it is on television or on digital. So we want to do a lot of partnerships to integrate data. We're working with Kantar, for instance, and what we decided to do with them is to make twins between their panel of purchasers, so food purchasers. So a store, like they have 20,000 panelist panel that scan every product they buy in the stores. We twin that with the Médiamétrie panel, with the ratings, and we're able to take all those purchasers' decisions and data into media data. So I can tell you now, we're launching that for our customers now. I can tell you when people are watching The Voice, which car model they own, which wash powder they buy, which coffee brand they're buying, and so on. And so I can propose on TV, not on digital. I can propose a coffee brand, for instance, to buy not on women to 16 to 34, but on coffee brand buyers. So this is on TV, not digital. This comes from the digital world because that data first came from the digital world, but we wanted TV to also be upgraded, but the data available. So of course, we also use third-party data that we can integrate into our proposal to our customers. And we're happy to do some partnerships on that. The reason why we are integrating the data world is that data is not only media buying. Data is a big revolution for industrials, for advertisers, as companies. Casper was mentioning that they gather a lot of data. They know much more about their customers than before. They do DMPs. They want to use that data to improve their marketing campaigns. They change their organizations, and we are good partners for them, and we want to be in the same process as they do and know about data. So this was part of our wish. Of course, when we use our first-party data, it gives very good results because when people are logged and surf using their we know everything. We know their age, gender, what program they like, and of course it's good data. But we understand that it's part of it, but it's not enough because the best thing is to use, for instance, Coca-Cola's data. Actually, what we are realizing right now is that although advertisers are very happy to talk about data, they're very reluctant for us to know about their data. So sometimes we make some partnerships, and at the last time, they say, "Oh, I'm so scared about you having access to my data."
Casper, how much data do we actually need for programmatic advertising? We've talked about gender, age, weather, location. What actually makes it useful? How much do we need?
I think it's the wrong question. Respectfully. And actually, it's sort of the term big data drives me crazy because I think it's such a it sort of leads you down a rabbit hole, which is exactly the wrong rabbit hole to go down. It's not about how much data you have. It's actually sort of irrelevant. What matters is the use cases, right? And what is it you want to use the data for? And you mentioned a couple of examples. I mean, sure, there's demographic data, but there are so many data triggers in the world today. And they give you so much incredible. They're the genesis of so many incredible ideas for media strategy and buying. I mean, Anne mentioned a couple as well. We have clients who target advertising only on days when there's a high pollen count. That's the only time they'll advertise high pollen count. And we're now doing that with outdoor as well. Why would you advertise hay fever medication on a low pollen count day? Why would you advertise pizza in the morning? Why would you advertise a summer holiday on a beautiful hot day? These are all sort of questions of waste that we used to face in our industry, and now across audio, we've just launched Access Audio, we have Access Out of Home, we have Display, we have all these places where we can decide to serve up an ad based on real-time data triggers, and that's amazing. Right? That completely changes the way that media is done. What it does also require is, as Anne said, an enlightened client to say, right, this is what I want you to do, not here's $1 million for some TV, here's $500,000 for some press, here's my search budget. Yeah. Actually what it requires is a new kind of partnership between the agency, because in most cases it is still the agencies doing this, despite of what even our clients will sometimes have you believe. It requires the agency and the client to have a totally different kind of partnership of trust, whereby they're briefing a real-time budget, i.e. they're not saying where they want it to go, they're just saying what data they might want you to activate, telling you about the product and the strategy and their own thinking about where that product is most relevant, and telling you what the results are they're trying to get out the other end. And that's all that matters, actually. And for that point there, the universe of data options is limited by your imagination. But it's not about how much of it you have. It's about what you have. Yeah.
But in terms of, I think, to Jack's question, like how it would look in practice. So to get all this, obviously the data depends on the campaign, as you've indicated, but how many partnerships are actually necessary to achieve all your goals? Like you.
What do you have?
Again, that'll be so. I totally agree. A lot of the campaigns will still be just age and gender because they're just trying to do complementary to what TV does. And apart from TF1, there aren't that many TV broadcasters are saying, I can enrich my data with this. So you end up saying, okay, I want household with children and this age and gender and maybe an income bracket, right? That's still 75% of the world. And then and that's fine. Because if your goal is purely distribution of that brand and a brand campaign that is that, why would you buy more data? Why would you make things more complex? And I completely agree with Casper. What's happening is the relationship with the advertiser and the agency has to change dramatically. It's not about the campaign, actually. It's about what Coca-Cola wants to achieve that year with its 12 brands and a whole group of customers that are in that funnel, right? And what they're going to try to do is actually build campaign by campaign to get to an end goal throughout the year. And therefore, indeed, the relationships with the agencies are much more about, let us share the strategic plans we have, budgets, because at the end of the day, they have budgets, and let's talk together about what we do with that as a whole, right? Is that 22 campaigns? Is it 5 campaigns? Is it 62 waves of campaigns integrated? Does it make sense to have a mobile-specific strategy? Why? Okay, what are we trying to achieve with that? And some of those conversations are happening, and they're fantastic when they do because you can do so much richer marketing. And some of them still don't because you're still talking about, well, I've got 10K for this next wave of campaign, and you're like, great, okay, we'll do this then. But you're seeing advertisers really start to embrace that new way of thinking because they'll have DMPs, because they are engaging with broadcasters in new ways. And again, as you said, it's much more partnerships, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's like asking how many publishers you need in your plan, right? You can have one, you can have 100. Yeah. I think the advantage, one of the advantages of programmatic, only one. One of the advantages of programmatic is that you don't need to think about media in a publisher-driven way, right? You just look at it as a pile of inventory, maybe sometimes sliced in kind of more of a private way, but it's a pile of inventory where you can bring other commodities like data to the table. I think what will fundamentally change, and at least that's one of the things we see from a Facebook perspective, not necessarily from a live perspective, is that driving to the end objective of business results is critical, right? It's like, because what you show in terms of slide of the share of online growing, it just means one thing. It means that online is held more and more accountable as the share grows, especially in places like the United Kingdom. So if you are capturing more share and knowing that I don't think any CMO is going to grow their budget, at least not the big ones, 20% next year, just they don't. The overall pie is not that much bigger, is how do you become more accountable? And I think that's, when you mention the ability to connect stuff to offline purchases, it's just going to become where everything comes under much more scrutiny. If programmatic solves for that better, great, that will grow. If direct transactions where the publisher is bringing data to the table because they can demonstrate that products went off the shelf, great, that will prevail. But it's really just about these business objectives.
Yeah. I think what's key for publishers is to be very open in whatever ecosystem they're building, whether it's on the data front, transparency, even within a publisher, you have a network of assets. Right? Advertisers are getting smarter and smarter about that network of assets. And I think previously, and I've seen that change very much with La Place Média and others, it was, oh, well, actually, I'm not sure I want to tell you where that ad was placed. And the advertiser's going, well, when it's TV, you tell me where it is. It's that program, and I know it's at 8 o'clock, and I see it. So why don't you want to show it to me when it's online? How does that make sense? What are you doing? And in fact, it's funny because nobody's doing anything funny. It's just there was a fear about the transparency because of the metrics, because of the measurability, because of the scrutiny.
Well,
And cannibalization. That's always been associated with digital. And we're seeing a dramatic shift now where we all know that transparency is absolutely required. And publishers should not be afraid of the transparency, nor of the metrics, because they're going to come anyways.
What we are learning from the TV world is that the risk with programmatic, it's what broadcasters are sometimes reluctant to go into that, is that it's so viewer-driven that the risk is that the advertisers deny any value to the content. Is that their priority is to go into the age bracket you were mentioning, and then whatever the woman below 35 is watching, I don't care. I just want the woman below 35. So we have to learn. This is what we try to do with our SSP. That to learn from the TV business is that there is a big relationship between good content and advertising efficiency. Everybody knows that on television. Everybody markets much higher the price for premium content, for prime time content. And the risk on the programmatic world on digital is that there is only one level for the price for the content. So our job in that environment, and again, it has to be open and shared, is that we have to do a lot of research on explaining how good content drives good efficiency. It's not only about contact, just about driving sales. So if you want to do sales, you need to contact to address a good person, but you have also to make it in a good brand safety world and also in a good engaged world. And there is a very big connection between engagement to a program and advertising efficiency.
Do you mind if I add something to that? Because there's one sort of element, and I probably shouldn't be saying this as someone who works on the data sort of driven side of this thing, but there's a sort of an element of self-fulfilling prophecy in data-driven targeting, right? Like you already know something about someone, you already know what they're interested in, and so it's a sort of the Google version of the world where you search for something, just by virtue of the fact that you're searching for it, you already know what you think you know what you want, right? And to me, that's actually quite a boring world, where people only give me stuff that they think I already know that they think I already want. And I think that's one of the reasons why Facebook is so successful, because it's the opposite of that. It's actually your friends and influencers putting things in front of you that you didn't necessarily know you already had an interest in. And I think that's where publishers and broadcasters and media owners and people who pay journalists to create amazing content have a role to play in this ecosystem far beyond just the data-driven piece, because it's this conversation starter. It's the thing that brings people in the first place, to maybe later reveal some preferences that we can, i.e. create data points that we can use in all the programmatic stuff. But, there is the AOL call it the barbell, the sort of the balance between the content and the data-driven parts of the strategy, and the fact that the two need to be connected with a very strong pole, not with a piece of string, because they work together, but they are quite separate and they need to be in balance.
Yeah, creativity still matters. That we used to call it serendipity, didn't we? When advertising suddenly created that moment, and that moment was usually very related to the context in which the advertising was placed, and it was just one of those moments where the context was perfect, the content was perfect, and the creative message that came from the advertiser just, and it was called serendipity, and you usually sold a lot of product based on serendipity. That hasn't gone away, and we need to preserve that more than ever, because indeed, if you forget the serendipity, you'll always sell exactly what you sold the day before.
Yeah, but I agree that everything moves to discovery, right? Mm-hmm. And this is why Facebook, one of the reasons that Facebook is really growing. I still think there will be, and again, I feel comfortable doing that because I work for Facebook, that there is a part that is not about discovery. So there's a lot of broadcast content that will I think can be protected from a discovery-driven world because I know that I want to go to HBO and watch season 2 of Silicon Valley. And I don't need anybody on my Facebook feed to tell me that. So the question is, will it have enough scale for you as a marketer to drive enough results? Can it be interesting? I think it's these two worlds continue to exist separately. The question is, what is growing faster? I think that trying to go back to display publishers came to the game with just inventory. They didn't bring any other value, right? And they were hammered because it's like, is that all you bring? Then that's all I pay you for. I think when people are going into programmatic, they cannot go with just inventory. If they, again, only go with just inventory, they will be hammered again. Mm-hmm. You want to go with other assets, and you got to set a price up front for these assets. We call it floor price, right? You say, look, here I added whether it's my data, whether it's Facebook gave me data, whether it's because I brought research, whatever that is, I added it to the inventory. I brought both the experience and the data, and I said, this is the entry-level price. Now you want to bring your own stuff, great. If it works for you, that's awesome. But I know what I need to get for it. I think this is absolutely crucial, and that's why I think in Europe, a lot of people go the private route, like with a TFI exchange, and we will call tomorrow a Channel 4 exchange or whatever it will be. It is about really, I'm bringing some stuff to the table, and I will not let you take away the value from that. You got to put a price against it.
So we've touched, I think, a little bit kind of on how it's moving more into TV. So what do you see as kind of the key differences as we move into something called, I guess, TV programmatic from the video space versus the TV space? Who are there going to be new players? Are there going to be players that aren't going to be involved? How's it going to look?
Well, as I mentioned before, the risk on programmatic is to separate the viewer world from the content world. So I'm rather optimistic about programmatic on digital, because I can see that we were mentioning the prices, and the advertisers are learning a lot. And then the first move they made was to have access to the good people, and now they're learning with new tools. I mean, programmatic is about technology, and technology sometimes moves faster than marketing. So I was a little bit afraid a couple of years ago that we were not able, for us not being able to explain what we bring to the table, as you have said. But with the viewability tools, for instance, we can explain that good viewability is linked to good content. Normally, you see the ad because you know the content that will be shown after is good. If you abandon, is that because you suppose that the content is not good? So viewability drives good content. And also brand safety. I'm very careful about brand safety. Sometimes some software, I think they have to improve a lot, because I can provide you tons of examples that people having brand safety softwares, and then I can see sometimes a perfume product with a drunk song, something like that. So I'm not sure it's a good way, but this is what also digital has to learn to improve, not only data-driven, but also context-driven, as you mentioned. To go on TV, many people is now excited about programmatic and say, next will be TV. So we want to do programmatic on television. Some part of programmatic we do already. For instance, we developed years ago, and we're not the only ones, that if you want to have, we have an engine that drives all the allocations of the spots depending on the campaign. So if you come to us and you say, my target is that, campaign dates are that, I want the best affinity of that target, we just propose you a campaign which is automatically generated, depending on your objectives and depending also on our inventory. So this is already part of programmatic. I was mentioning the data before, that we think also that TV has to become data-driven, and that if we can add those purchase behaviors into the TV ratings and the TV data, then we can do that kind of campaigns, but not on women, but on, again, coffee buyers or telecom decision makers, for instance. What we already think about is, will we be able to do one-to-one broadcasting, which is actually what programmatic drives to. What you were mentioning with your slide before, then on the website you can pick every impression. So many people is very excited about, can we do that on TV sometime? We're thinking about it. We have some legal problems so far. Actually, French law doesn't make it, we cannot do as many TF1s as people. It's not, we have obligation to do only one channel. In many countries in Europe, it's the same, so we cannot do separate channels, even for advertising. So legal is a problem, but we can, it's a problem we can still think. So we are working with ISPs on that, because again, with IPTV, we could think it's an easier way to do a separate channel than terrestrial, which makes it, of course, very difficult. What we see now is that we're waiting for advertisers' matters, because on TV right now, and on many countries the same, when you do a campaign, you only pay for a target, but you get all the audience. So when I tell my clients, if you go to programmatic tomorrow, let's dream about that, you buy women 15 to 49, and then only women 15 to 49 will see your ad, because we're in a programmatic magical world, and the other ones won't see it, because you're not paying for it. And then they say, okay, let's do the old way, because actually I'm a mass, I want to mass, I launch a product, and even if I tell you I don't want to pay for the other ones, they still buy products. So
internally, do you guys feel, and maybe you don't have to answer, let's say your opinion about Channel 4, right? Different country, there's not going to, do you feel in 5 years' time that the amount of inventory available through set-top boxes will grow dramatically? Because I have 4 kids, and this weekend I couldn't get them a single time to see the same show, just on TV. No matter what movie I offered to pay for the movie just for 4 of them to sit there and be happy. It just didn't work. And they're not that, like the age disparity is not that big. But you have the data. I understand if you don't want to share it about TF1, but in general, do you guys feel 5 years' time that there will be more people using this large box just because we're used to it?
Actually, what I think is that the panel before us was talking about premium content, and I mean, it's not very surprising being TF1 to say that, but we strongly think that tomorrow the premium content will be still very important to people, because one-to-one TV is great, but we cannot make and finance one-to-one The Voice program. So we think our business is to go on thinking about shows that gather everybody, and make possible to the customers to reach mass audience very quickly. And I don't believe in niche shows, because normally we're not able to finance that. And I also think that for customers, for our clients, advertisers, it's good to have access to, when you launch a product, you need to drive everybody to the stores in 2-3 months. So.
But does it make sense to invest in programmatic TV? Does it make sense to invest in one-to-one TV, bar all the legal issues? As an industry, do we want to spend time even thinking about it when we don't think that the amount of inventory will necessarily grow dramatically, and all we're trying to do is to squeeze higher yield from the same amount of inventory, or even decreasing inventory? Because at the end of the day, for me, the biggest advantage with a TV screen is there's no distraction. You don't have to worry about distraction, because it's so kind of 70s-like that there's nowhere else to go. While with all the other stuff, it's just very easy to change. So the advertiser is automatically thinking, well, the user will be distracted by this, he's not going to see that, right? That's the...
If we are thinking about and doing research connections with ISP so far, because if programmatic goes into TV, it has to be in a very impeccable quality. You cannot see, like in digital, the buffering and so on. So it has to beat the TV world. It's a marketing discussion more than a technology discussion, because all the 90% of all the advertisers are targeting below 50. If it depends also on the capacity of our inventory, it will be good for us if we can sell women to somebody and men to somebody. But typically, our customers buy everybody below 50, and the over 50 is not worth a lot. So far,
in advertising. Yeah.
But I do think set-top boxes are changing dramatically. They're moving away from being complicated devices to actually being very simple devices, and everything operating in the cloud. And all of the intelligence is now moving to the cloud. And it's much more about, very simple Android-type devices that are actually dumb devices, just there to receive stuff and signal at the most efficient. In fact, it's all about buffering. The set-top box will just become a buffering machine that just optimizes connectivity. When you truly move into that world, yes, you can offer a shed load more of stuff, because it's going to be cloud-based and it's going to be smarter. Whether that's advertising or just better editorial or faster access to that content, we've all talked about the issue that we still can't get to the content we want. That's a form of programmatic. You shouldn't think of programmatic as just being about yield optimization for advertisers. Programmatic is about using technology to get a better experience, a better consumer experience at the end of the day, right? If we don't deliver a better consumer experience, our ads will not be more effective, they'll be less effective. So for me, fundamentally, when you're looking at programmatic, you forget everything about what we actually do and just say, am I delivering a better consumer experience? And am I keeping the internet free?
I'm very pessimistic about the set-top boxes and the TVs. I feel it's just way too slow. You go and you pay a vendor that does a box with hardware that he needs to save money on, so like the chips don't work. You tie yourself into somebody that asks you to pay like $100 a month, And it just, the innovation needs to be much faster. I'm just concerned that people will lose. I really believe it can be a better experience. I think it should be. There shouldn't be a reason that my remote control still looks like something with buttons. All these things still happen, and I think that people will move faster. I think it will actually change, but the whole user experience will just need to change, because otherwise you just lose to these things. It's companies that have a larger market cap. They develop hardware faster. They bring the biggest talent. They pay them the highest salary. They spend the most of money on marketing the devices as well. It's so difficult to compete with it. I think it needs to move faster. It cannot just remain this set-top box. Yeah.
On that point, and perhaps to give some of the people involved in the set-top box a chance to defend their position, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience.
There goes my clients that are potential clients that are set-top box companies.
Any questions?
In the back. If you could say your name and where you're from as well.
Yeah, I'm Steve Hyde from 360 Exec. It's a question for Casper, actually. Since the late 80s, when the media agencies, the money in the picture split and the media agencies were created, there was an acceleration towards leverage scale, using the scale to leverage in the relationships with media owners and latterly platforms. That has become culturally embedded in the way that the agencies work in their relationships with the platforms. When you're driving towards programmatic, and transparency is much more likely to be an evidential outcome, how will you run those cultural differences, or how quickly will you change them to become one single way of operating?
So first of all, I think in the programmatic space, again, if you define it as we define it, which is a much broader definition than just RTB, right? Scale matters a lot. In fact, I would argue that scale probably matters more than it did when you just had the single one-to-one relationship. And the reasons are very simple. I mean, a lot of the problems we've talked about here on stage, the problems of fraud, the problems of viewability, the importance of the environment, all these sorts of things, technology makes those problems worse, not better. Viewability is a bigger problem now than it was 10 years ago. Fraud is a much bigger problem now than it was 10 years ago, because what technology has enabled us to do, especially in the RTB sort of open exchange, even private exchange to some extent environment, is break down or use technology to bypass what used to be a relationship between an agency and a publisher, or even a client and a publisher. Whoever the relationship was, there used to be a relationship there, right? Technology has enabled us to bypass that. Great, okay, fine. Well, actually, it creates lots of problems. Leaving aside viewability and fraud, the other issue is that our advertisers work with us for three reasons. One is all the great, amazing advice they get from us, so fine, but let's park that for a second. They want the best media at the lowest possible price, right? That's it, okay? And it's our trading scale and the combination of all those clients spend when talking to big publishers that's always enabled us to do that. And they still want us to do that now. That hasn't changed. I mean, they still want us to get them the best media at the lowest possible price, but they expect us to do that in an environment where they're executing programmatically, which really just means they're serving an ad impression to an audience that they want to target and managing all that waste, but doing it in an environment where there's no viewability problems and no fraud problems and everything else. So for us, programmatic is, we execute programmatically. We decide when to serve an ad based on data, all the stuff we've talked about, but actually 75% of our inventory across EMEA comes from working directly with publishers, right? Creating a pool of inventory across which we execute. We buy very little on open exchanges because it's just, there's no way I can generate an advantage for the clients that I work with. As I said, because of the problems of the quality of the inventory and because of so it's not the best media, and because of the fact that I have no way of getting them a price advantage.
Just to touch on the point.
Please.
You understand the point I'm making, that your margins have been made because of the leverage scale traditionally. That's where you're making the margin. The more transparency there is, the more evidence there is to the clients of the margin you're making, and the more of that they will want.
Yep. But if you're talking about business models, I mean, we are extremely transparent with our clients about how we make our money. I think of WPP, we're the most transparent of all the groups. I know there's a lot of controversy around rebates and other things. I mean, we have, in all of our contracts with our clients, we're very clear about what the relationship with our clients is about rebates that we make from those clients. And that's been the case for a very, very long time. Sure, the business is changing. I mean, a lot of our income is still fee-based income. For a business like Xaxa specifically, we're extremely open about what our business model is. What we sell is audience products, which are priced, which are able to be benchmarked, which are completely open to audit. All of the auditors that our agencies work with audit us just like they audit any other media partner on the media plan, exactly the same way. I have no God-given right to be on the media plan. There are lots of media plans that I don't appear on because either we weren't performing or we weren't priced right. But we also have 2,700 clients who work with us every day who look at the price that they're paying for Xaxa's product and benchmark that against the price that they're paying for other media products and realize that either from a performance point of view or from a pricing point of view, it makes sense for that to be on their media plan. The agency's role is to advise their clients on that and to manage that across all the different vendors that may exist, including the Googles and the Facebooks and everyone else. Where we get frustrated is when different standards of transparency get applied to different companies in the ecosystem, because actually, I won't name names, but there are many companies that purport to be extremely transparent who actually aren't, and just because they're not part of the agencies, they sort of get held to different standards of account. So, we get held to very high standards of accountability, and I'm very happy with that and very comfortable about the model.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yes, on the back there.
Hi there, William Tyler from Sony Mobile. It's really interesting that, and I actually just, to be transparent, I sit a little bit more on the advertising creative side of things, that actually we haven't spent a lot of time talking about quality. It did get slightly touched on in that last thing, and I think it's great from Fabrice about the quality of the programs that things want to be around. One of the things for us, and we are moving and creating a lot of video content, so it really tied into what you were talking about before, and using, we advertise in different markets and all the different platforms. And our teams, certainly from a global level, are also looking for the interaction and the completion of those videos. And we haven't necessarily touched on, we've talked a lot about serving them and getting them on there. We haven't talked about how good they are once they're there or if they're performing. How does some of the things we talked about enable us to learn in real time? I thought it was very interesting the way you talked about, we might give a media brief that says women of 36 that buy coffee, but actually maybe they aren't the right ones. So how could we potentially learn in real time if we targeted more to begin with, and as we looked at a certain demographical group that were going through a completion and another whole lot that we're sharing, how could this type of thinking enable us to learn during the process?
We actually have brands that ask for access to the daily reports, and they will actually analyze with their agencies what's performing. And it's not just which publisher is performing, it's more they will have the exact segment they wanted, other periphery segments, and they will often say, oh, that's interesting, this one's performing better than the core. What is that telling us about? Or they will look at completion rates and see whether it's just the ad is too long or not performing at its end. And if there's a clear drop-off, like at 25 seconds, for example, then it shouldn't be a 30-second ad. It should be a 25-second ad. We're seeing advertisers really embrace changing in real time their plans, which makes it even harder sometimes because you are literally every day changing thousands of campaigns, but for the right reasons, because your brands are looking at it. And what's really interesting is they will want access now to those daily reports. Yeah. And it doesn't, a few years ago, we were quite nervous when we do that because we think, oh my God, they're just going to shut down that one publisher that's not performing, or they will do a knee-jerk reaction to say, that's not working. They have really, brands have really learned the art of programmatic, and that real-time kind of analysis is fabulous.
Yeah. One of the things that we find our clients doing is, let's say a budget is 100, they might allocate 80 to the audiences they want to target, but we often encourage them to leave 20 untargeted, and we call that the audience discovery budget. So that just runs wherever, and our analysts look at that and create some pretty cool bubble charts that sort of show how close and how large the audience is and how responsive they are, and then sort of it's almost like a backward integration or interrogation of our data management platform to look at and say, well, who's responding to this ad? Forget who we're targeting for it, who's actually responding, and then sort of saying, well, actually, we should be targeting pet lovers for something, which, who knew, right? but they're indexing extremely high. They're actually quite a large segment, and so we changed the targeting strategy. Because there was a dog in the ad, whatever. I mean, it's crazy some of the stuff that comes up. We had a great case study in the US, if I may just very quickly, which was, in the US, again, using third-party data vendors. This isn't possible in Europe, but you can use data about whether people are Republican or Democrat voters. And we were running a campaign for Volkswagen, and they were targeting Democrats. Because that was sort of the combis and everything else. Of course they're Democrat voters. Well, actually, guess what? They grew up and they're buying cars for their kids. They're all Republicans now. And it sort of, it was really interesting because they refused to believe that their core user base is Republican, but actually they are now.
Is there one more question I think I saw over here? Oh, yeah. Do you have something similar for the UK now, given that it's general election?
I wish. I mean,
Hi, I'm Skip Riddle. I've just got a question regarding the DMPs and the capabilities of those DMPs. Came up frequently in your discussion. Are you finding that the evolution of the DMPs, that the DMPs that are delivering those qualities that you're looking for in display are also capable equally in video? Or is there any difference?
So first of all, I think the term DMP is it's like big data. It's another word that people throw around with great carelessness. Right? There is no such thing as a DMP. There are so many different DMPs, and the question actually is, as to your point, what's the use case? And we built our own DMP because for our very specific use case, there wasn't a DMP available on the market. There are first-party DMPs that clients may use, like Adobe and various others. There are lots of different solutions in the market. I find the bigger difference is on the use case of the data, not necessarily of the transportability of that across the inventory that you might later want to buy. There are lots of connectivity issues, but I don't think they're necessarily different depending on if it's display or video. Different if you start to talk about things like what TF1 are doing in terms of the TV piece of things, because again, the integrations are completely different. So I imagine the DMP strategy needs to be very different as well. But in the online space, which is still primarily cookie-based, it doesn't matter. Again, mobile TV is sort of slightly different.
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. If you could join me in thanking our panel, Casper and Fabrice and Yoav.